The Duke University Superfund Research Center is focused on early life exposures to environmental chemicals and their consequences later in life. Our top-flight investigators and trainees are committed to understanding the complex and dynamic landscape of environmental health. Their innovative approaches and unique personal research stories shape the rich landscape of our work.
I'm Jordan Kozal. I recently graduated with my Ph.D. in environment with a certificate in integrated toxicology and environmental health. While I was at Duke, I was a member of Rich DiGiulio's lab, which is in Project 4 of Duke Superfund Research Center. So I've always been very passionate about both human health and the environment, and as an undergraduate, I was pretty conflicted what sort of career path I wanted to take. Ultimately, I kind of realized that my passions for the environment and for human health and environmental health in general weren't actually distinct. I studied at the Hopkins Marine Station of Stanford University my junior year, and I took comparative animal physiology with Dr. Barbara Block. And ultimately, I began researching in her lab and looked at the effects of oil on tuna and mackerel cardiac physiology and gene expression. And some of that research was actually used in the litigation suing BP after the oil spill. So that was a pretty exciting start into toxicology. Ultimately, I thought my research at Stanford was very fascinating, but I became interested in Rich DiGiulio's lab at Duke because it added another variable to the mix, and that was time. He studies how similar chemicals that are found in oil, that are found in creosote at Superfund sites, actually have driven evolution in the environment and can have persistent effects across several generations. And it was really cool when I started looking into the lab, I realized that Nishad Jayasundara, who had been a graduate student at Hopkins Marine Station when I was an undergraduate there, actually was now doing his postdoc at Duke. And so that was a really cool way to connect and realize that we had similar interests, and that's kind of how I found Duke. Human and wildlife exposures to polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons are completely ubiquitous, and the levels of PAHs are continually rising in the environment. So understanding the mechanisms which contribute to their toxicity across several generations will be really important, not only for understanding different human disease etiologies, but also understanding organismal fitness in the environment, and particularly in a changing environment. And so I actually took the grandchildren fish that had mitochondrial dysfunction, that were 2 generations out from the exposed mothers, and I found that they were more susceptible to temperature stress. And so that opens up a whole array of new avenues relating to how combinations of stressors affect fitness of organisms, but also of potentially humans in cities living with high levels of air pollution who also have immune challenges or other sorts of stressors. So in children of mothers who live in cities with high levels of air pollution, we often see higher rates of anxiety behaviors. We see higher rates of autism spectrum disorders and a variety of other neurobehavioral problems, or even just lower IQs and learning challenges. So it's a way to see if similar behavioral phenotypes are seen in fish as we would see in an epidemiological study. My work represents the first demonstration that PAH-induced mitochondrial dysfunction contributes to the ability of PAHs to have toxicity across several generations. And also it is the first demonstration that mitochondrial dysfunction that's induced by an environmental contaminant as opposed to a pharmacological agent can actually have toxicity across more than one generation removed from an exposed individual. I will be continuing my career as a toxicologist, working as a health scientist at an environmental consulting company, doing things like litigation support, risk assessment, and regulatory comments. And I certainly hope to continue working with the Superfund Research Program throughout that time, both through collaborations and through fascinating discussions at conferences, but also by incorporating the research advancements from those centers into the risk assessments and other work that I will be doing.